Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So we got a little bit different order of service tonight, and I'm actually, as part of that, I'm going to give the sermon almost immediately. We'll sing a little bit just to start, and I'll explain why for all of that. But just Moedim L'Simcha is a traditional greeting that we offer on the in-between days of Passover, and the response to Moedim L'Simcha is Chagim Uzmanim L'Sason. So Moedim L'Simcha, the festivals for joy, meaning that they're hopefully a time of happiness, is Passover thing, and the response is Sason's another form of joy. Moedim L'Simcha, Chagim Uzmanim, so festivals and special times for a different sort of joy as well. So there you go, a little bit of a Jewish education along the way. So why don't we just get settled here with a little Hine Matov, always a good way to sort of be here together. So, Hine Matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov, yalalai, yalalalalai. Hine Matov, yalalai, yalalalalai. Hine Matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Okay, I'm going to call up at this time Dana and Jeanette, who are going to light the Shabbat candles for us. Shabbat Shalom. And Chol HaMoed, this intermediate time, is so interesting, right? We just say the normal blessing. So tonight I'm going to give my sermon now, and it's really more a teaching than a sermon. Sometimes when the world is crazy, it's important to sort of reflect on that. And other times it's important to just reflect on straight up Judaism and forget the craziness of the world. So this falls into that latter mode. So why is Kabbalat Shabbat shortened on Shabbat Chol HaMoed, a historical detective story? So tonight is Chol HaMoed Pesach, meaning that it's the Shabbat that falls on the intermediate days of the festival of Passover. And I thought it would be instructive to provide a little background about that, because there are many changes that occurred during the intermediate days in general and on Shabbat as well. First off, the intermediate days of the festival, whether it's Passover or Shavuot, are considered lighter in our religious practices, right? It's not Shabbat, it's not Chag, and that makes a little bit difference. But even on the actual days, right, many forms of productive activity are forbidden on the actual days of a festival, just like Shabbat, with the exception of food. So you can cook a meal on the festival, something that traditionally is not done on Shabbat. And in fact, there's a really beautiful Hebrew phrase for this, which is Ein bein Shabbat v'Yom Tov, ella ochel nefesh bilvad, which literally means there is nothing between Shabbat and the festivals except for Ochel Nefesh, which literally translates as soul food. In other words, Shabbat and festivals share many of the same restrictions which give them their special character, with the exception of Ochel Nefesh, of this soul food. You can do all sorts of cooking on a festival because it adds to the joy of the day. And I've always loved this phrase of Ochel Nefesh. I've often wondered whether it's one of the reasons that African Americans and Jews have such a long and storied history, because, right, we both understand that food does more than fuel our bodies. It can also fuel our souls.
Does that mean Chol HaMoed supersedes Shabbat, so we can cook tomorrow, or Shabbat still supersedes Chol HaMoed?
Shabbat still supersedes. It's the phrase, as long as we're doing this more as a teaching than a sermon, Shechiach ve'eno shechiach kodem. So if something happens all the time, it takes precedence over something that happens less frequently. And Shabbat happens every week, whether we're here or not, right? So that's, it's a good try. It's a good Jewish try to get through. And of course, I recognize that some people cook on Shabbat anyway. But despite the phrase of Ein bein Shabbat v'yom tov ella ochel nefesh, besides that soul food, there are other differences. And one of the very visible changes is this, our Kabbalat Shabbat service. Because in just, when I finish this comment, we're going to begin our service by skipping over almost all of Kabbalat Shabbat and go directly to Psalm 92. So how come? It's actually a bit of a mystery, especially since certain Sephardic groups don't abridge their Shabbat service. Yet it is the standard practice in most of the Ashkenazic world and certainly in most of the conservative movement as well. It's customary to begin on Psalm 92. And I thought I'd give a longer talk on this because every time when we do it, people look at me shell-shocked, like, what happened to the service? Okay, this is it. So to unravel this mystery, we have to peer back into the earliest layers of Jewish prayer history. And in those way back times, there was no evening service at all. Not on the weekdays, and not on Shabbat. Y'all could be home if it was back then. People would finish work, they'd go home to be with their families or in small friendship groups, and the word for this, going way back in time, some of you will recognize, is chavrutot. So the original chavrutas, chavrutot, goes way back to pre-Babylonian times, actually. And you might, on your own at home, recite a personal prayer, and the Talmud actually records one that we have from Rabbi Tzadok, which is, and because of your love, Adonai our God, with which you love your people, and because of your kindness, you gave us this great and holy seventh day in love. And after that, I guess he was on to matzah ball soup or whatever the Babylonians ate back then, or pre-Babylonians, because by the time of Babylonian Jewry, which is about 200 to 500 of the Common Era, services, Friday night services, began to be held. And interestingly, apparently the Jews worked in the city, worked in one of the main cities of Babylon, but they must have lived in the suburbs because certainly the synagogues were outside the city. They were a little bit further removed, and therefore it took some people a little bit of time to get there. Additionally, people were afraid of crime back then, not unique to Portland today, and they didn't want to walk home at night alone, and as a consequence, the Friday night service was lengthened so that, I'm looking at the door right now, so that those who arrived late would still have company on the way home. That's actually the real reason why we have the longer service that we do, because, we're on Jewish Standard Time, and y'all arrived on time, but not everyone did. It's also why I thought I would speak at the beginning of the service to provide an opportunity for our stragglers, hi Ben, to be here for part of the service. One of the additions to this service, though, was the repetition of the Amidah, right? And we, in the tradition at CNS, which goes back even before Rabbi Stamfer, was not to do a full repetition, but only the Magain Avot paragraph. And in that way, there's a certain weird connection in which Neve Shalom's practice is actually what goes back to the Babylonian times, actually, or even that far. Anyway, this impulse to extend the Friday night service provided the Kabbalists of Tzfat the perfect opportunity to add Psalms 95 through 99, which is what we normally think of, as Kabbalat Shabbat, in addition to Lecha Dodi, which was the newest, greatest prayer that was created in those days. But why remove all this stuff during Chol HaMoed Shabbat, a Passover? Wouldn't the same sort of reasons apply? And I haven't found a clear historical record, but we do know that some people don't actually work during Chol HaMoed, and if that were the case, people wouldn't be as likely to arrive late, and the need for a longer service to protect people on their way home wouldn't have been so pressing an issue. One possible explanation comes to us rather late in the Aruch HaShulchan, which 19th and 20th century book by Rabbi Yechiel Michal Epstein, Lithuanian rabbi. He started it in the 19th century and concluded it in the early part of the 20th. And in his commentary, he writes that we gather in shul and we say 5 chapters of Psalms from L'chuna Ranana, that's 95, L'chuna Ranana, not doing it tonight, until Hashem Malach Yegazu Amim, Psalm 99, because they are about the future of redemptive days, right? We sing Kabbalat Shabbat to let us know that there is a better time, that the future actually is coming, and it's going to be better than what we have now. Please God, thank God, we want that sort of hope. However, on a festival, Passover itself is the promise and the hope of that better time, right? This is this festival of freedom, and we're supposed to have an experience of freedom. And so maybe that's actually why we leave that off. The holiday itself is the sign. It's the same way that many people don't wear tefillin in the morning because the holiday itself, Chol HaMoed, is the sign, so you don't need to do that. But I think what's remarkable is that this was really difficult for me to research. I knew that we did this, and I knew for years, and every time I'd come up here and tell you on one of these festivals that we're starting, I'd always sort of like wonder, did they teach me this in rabbinical school? And it's sort of strange, because one of the beautiful things about our tradition is that normally there is a reason for everything. Sometimes there's more than one reason. Right? We have a faith that's very rational in certain ways, yet every so often, as with this shortened Kabbalat Shabbat, we can't actually ever be 100% clear as to why the change exists. And at times like that, if we can fall back onto another very interesting Jewish custom, which is that minhag avotenu biyadenu. It literally means that the customs we receive from our parents and grandparents are in our hands to maintain. And that's a thought I sort of want to lead us with, because we are in a time where so many people are ungrounded. They don't have ritual, they don't have traditions of their own. They feel at a certain loss, and we have that, and it's up to us sort of to preserve it, so that at a moment like this, even when we don't have a clear reason for the practice, that itself grounds us and connects us to all of our ancestors. And I think that that is a pretty powerful way to feel their presence in here a little bit and to celebrate the holiday. So with that said, we are going to turn to page 27 as we begin our shortened Kabbalat Shabbat. Mizmor shir leyom HaShabbat, tov lehodot lahadonai, Uzamer l'shimcha elyon, Uzamer l'shimcha elyon. Mizmor shir leyom HaShabbat, tov lehodot l'Adonai, Uzamer l'shimcha elyon, Uzamer l'shimcha elyon. Lagid baboker chastecha, ואמונתך בלילות, עלי עשור ועלי נבל, עלי היגיון בכינור, מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, וזמר לשמך עליון, וזמר לשמך עליון. כי שימחתני ירנה בפולך במעשה ידיך רנן, מה גדלו מסקר עליהם הציצו גבוה לאבן. כי הנה אויביך אדוני, כי הנה אויביך יאבדו, יתפרדו גבוה לאבן. middle of page 28. Tzadika tamar yifrach ke'erez balbanon yizkeh shetulim bebeit Adonai bechatzrot Eloheinu Yafrichu od yenuvun b'seva deshenim v'rananim yeyu lehagid ki asha Adonai suri velo ablatabo Adonai malak eut lavesh. Middle of 29. Mikolot ma'im rabim adirim adirim mishpereyam mikolot ma'im rabim adirim adirim mishpereyam adir bamarom yalailai adir bamarom yalailai adir bamarom Adonai adir bamarom yalailai adir bamarom yalailai adir bamarom Adonai mikolot ma'im rabim adirim adirim mishpereyam edotech enanu me'od leveit chanav HaKodesh Adonai leorek yamim. And we'll jump to page 39 now. I'll ask you to rise as we continue with the Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai Mevorach leolam va'ed. Please be seated. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher biro ma'ariv ha'aravim b'chokma potech she'arim u'v'tvonem mishnei ha'hitim u'machali ve'hazmanim u'msadeh kol ravim b'mishmoroteihem b'rakir kozno borei yom b'layla golel or mipnei choshek v'choshek mipnei or u'mahavir yom u'mevi layla u'mabdil bein yom u'bein layla Adonai tzevot shemo El chai v'kayam tamid yimlok aleinu leolam va'ed. Baruch ata Adonai hamariv aravim. Page 40. Ahavat olam beit Yisrael amcha hafta Torah u'mitzvot hukim u'mishpatim Otanu limadita al ken Adonai Eloheinu b'shogveinu v'kumeinu nasiach b'chukecha b'nismach b'divrei toratecha ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו באורך ימינו, ובהם נהגה יומם בלילה. ותאכל תשים ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, bechol levavcha, ubechol nafshecha, ubechol meodecha, v'hayu hadivarim ha'ele, asher nochi mitzavecha, hayom al levavecha, v'shinantam levanecha, v'dibarta bam, b'shivtecha b'veitecha, uvlektecha b'derech, ushokbecha uvkumecha, ukshartam liot al yadecha, v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha, uktabtam al mezuzot beitecha uvihisharecha. We continue privately, 42. Vayim Shmat. למען ירבו ימיכם וימי בניכם עד אשר נשבע. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור. Adonai Elohechem emet. We're on 44. Umalchuto biratzon kiblu aleihem. Moshe u'miyam u'bnei Yisrael achanu shira b'simcha rabba v'yamru chulam. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai. Mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh. Nohora tehilot, oho sefele. Malchutecha reuvanecha, boker yam lifnei Moshe. Zeli anu v'yamru, Adonai imlok leolam va'ed. V'nehemar kifed Adonai et Yaakov, ugalo miyad chazak mimenu. Baruch ata Adonai Gal Yisrael. 45. We're going to do the Craig Tauman version. And so the first two lines I will sing twice, and then you guys get to sing it twice. We'll then go to the Ushmor Seitenu a single time, and we'll go back to the Hashkivenu for 4 repetitions. That's the Craig Tauman thing, so you'll get 2 times if you're not familiar with it. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu malkeinu l'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu malkeinu l'chaim. Your turn. ושמור צאתנו ובואנו לחיים ולשלום מעתה ועד עולם. השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום והעמידנו מלכנו לחיים. 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 ופוס עלינו סוכת שלומך ותקננו בעצה טובה מפניך ועשה סיימן יגון זה סנטה וצל כנפך תסתירנו כי אשרנו מצילנו כי אל מלכנו בטוב ושמור צאתנו ובואנו לחיים ושלום מעתה ועד עולם ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך ברוך אתה אדוני הפורס סוכת שלום עלינו ועל עמו ישראל ועל ירושלים. We'll rise 46. בשמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש יגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה ויעמד דברכותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ועלמי עלמיא יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר רומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמינן בעלמה v'yimeru. Amen. We move now into our private Amidah, beginning on 47. On 48, in the middle, we're outside of the rainy season in the land of Israel, so we don't say Mashiva Ruach, we say Morid Hatal. It is the season of dew. And then on page 50, that second paragraph, we recite with the section where it says on Pesach. So that adjusts for this Chol HaMoed Shabbat. Page 47 to 52. We'll continue on page 53. Magen avod bidvaro, mechaye metim b'mamaro, ha'el hakadosh shein kamohu, ha'meniach le'amo, b'yom Shabbat kodsho, kivam ratza lehaniach lahem, kivam ratza lehaniach lahem, lefanav navod be'yira v'fachad, b'nodeh lishmo b'chol yom tamid, me'en ha'berachot. El haodahot Adon Hashalom Mekadesh HaShabbat Umberek Shevi Umeniach Bikdusha Le'amedu Shnei Oneg Zecher Zecher Lemase Bereshit. 54, Kaddish them. Yigadav Yigdash Shemeraba, Biamad Ivrakute, Biamlik Machute, Bechayachon, Biamechon, Bechayed Kobe Israel, Bagalavis Man Kari, Biimmeru, Amen. Yehesh Meraba Mivorach, Leolam Wal Meal Maya. Yitbarach, Yitbarach, Vishtabach, Yitbar, Vitram Vinase, Yithadar, Yithalevel al Shmei de Kudisha, Leila min kol bechata vishirata, Tush bechata benechamata, Damirambi alma biimmeru, Tid kabel slot hon, over hon, the kol Yisrael kodom over hon Yishmaya biimmeru, Yehe shlamar min Shemaya, Vechaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael biimmeru, Ohoseh shalom b'mamav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'yimeru, amen. We'll rise. Kiddush. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu b'shabbat kodsho b'ahava uvratzon inchilanu zikon lemahaseh bereshit ki hu yom techila lemikra kodesh zecher letziat mitzrayim ki banu v'chata v'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha v'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh HaShabbat. So we'll jump ahead to page 63. We're in this, there are all sorts of jokes about Jews being doctors and lawyers, and I guess there's also a joke about Jews being accountants, because we're in the great period of counting between the second night of Passover and the holiday of Shavuot, this period known as the Omer, after the Omer, the sheaf of new grain that was brought to the ancient rite, the temple, or the tent of meeting even earlier, and presented what was the oldest ritual that we have recorded and that we recited during the Passover Seder of my father was a wandering Aramean, and that was recited word for word as a person would bring their fresh grain to the period. Most of us are not farmers anymore, and Judaism is a religion of accretion, meaning that there's layers of history and additional layers of meaning that get put on top of it. So in that very early commandment, tied both to the Exodus and to the agricultural gifts of the land, we also have this whole tradition of connecting the Omer with Kabbalistic practices. And this whole first week, we're connecting with the Midah of Chesed. There are different attributes by which God's divinity enters the world, and so we have a week in which we're sort of focused right now on chesed and kindness, and so I invite you to sort of as you do a little inventory before you go to bed each night, thinking about the acts of kindness, of chesed that you received, and take a moment or two to think about the acts of chesed, of kindness that you offered to others through the day. I think it'll sort of be an interesting way of counting that. It is still daylight. And this is one of the occasions where we can't rush the Omer. Normally, we can bring in a Shabbat early, and we can, and we did, but we can't shortchange the counting of 49 days. So we're not going to recite the blessing here, but we will recite last night's Omer count, and this way, when it gets to be dark, you guys, wherever you are, can then recite the next one. So, Hinene umuchan umzuman lekayem mitzvata se shel sfirata Omer, Kamosha Katuv Torah. Let's read together in the English on 63. We are about to fulfill the mitzvah of counting the Omer as it is written in the Torah. You shall count from the eve of the second day of Pesach when an Omer of grain is to be brought as an offering 7 complete weeks. The day after the 7th week of your counting will make 50 days. And so on page 64, we can read last night's count, which is still today's until sundown. Hayom Slosha Yamim LaOmer. Today is 3 days of the Omer. Count well, count often, but don't count early. And with that, we are going to remain standing as we turn back to 56 for Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, latet gedula leotze bereshit, shelo asanu kigoye haratzot, melo samanu kimishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, וגוהר עלינו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. על כן נקבל לך אדוני אלוהינו לראות מהרה בתפארת עוזך, להעביר גילולים מן הארץ והאלילים קרות יכרתון, לתקן עולם במלכות שדי, וכל בני בשר יקראו בשמך, להפנות אליך כל אישי הארץ, יכירו וידעו כל יושבי תבל, כי לך תקרא כל ברך, תשבע כל לשון. לפניך אדוני אלוהינו יקראו ויפולו, ולכבוד שמך יקראתנו, ויקבלו כולם את עול מלכותך, ותמלוך עליהם מהרה לעולם ועד. כי המלכות של אחי הוא המעט, תמלוך בכבוד. כך כתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר היה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. Please be seated. So, in a moment, we are going to turn to recite the Kaddish tome. And I got a question over the last week about why we made this change, and someone wanting it to go back to the old way of every name being read, primarily someone who was online. And we have supposedly, I've checked again, have that list available so that you can pull it up on your computer. We can't do that with the live stream. But the reason, there's a bunch of different reasons, but one of the things people asked was, first of all, some of these names people haven't been there in a long time, and a long time ago, Major had the list, and he would mark everyone who was going to come. I don't know how, but he knew whether the person's family was going to show up or not. So in the age of Major, very, very few names were ever read. And somehow he hit it perfectly because he was Major. After Major passed, that was right when Rabbi Isaac was starting, he didn't have that level of knowledge of the community, and all the names began to be read. And after 30 years, there were a lot more names. And we had people say, do we need to read all the names? And then, interesting, we had people who said, I want to read the name of my loved one. So what we did was to have the list here. It's just good to explain. Sometimes these changes happen so that everyone can see who we're remembering this week, and so that those who are remembering a loved one have the opportunity to sort of give voice to their own loved one as well. So with that said as introduction, I want to invite everyone who is in a period of mourning or observing a yard site to rise so that we can indeed hear their names directly from their loved ones and survivors. And all those on the list, and all those we hold dear, and those who perished recently, and have no one to say Kaddish for them. Page 658. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemer Rabba v'alma divra kirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael v'agala v'zman kari v'yimru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevarach Le'olam Olamei Almaya Yit Barak V'yishtabach V'yit Pa'ar V'yit Ramam V'yit Naseh V'yit Hadar V'yit Taleh V'yit Halal Shmei D'Kudsha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata vishirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiram bi'alma v'imru, amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'mamav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru, amen. So please be seated. Yasher koach, everyone. Did people enjoy their seders? I enjoyed both seders, a seder at my house, and then we had a wonderful community seder, which was, we had 115 people here, and there's just a beautiful feeling in the room. And Cantor Bitone is not here tonight, you may have noticed. First of all, his throat's been bothering him, but he's up with Rabbi Eve at family camp at Camp Solomon Schechter. So I'm holding down the fort here, and they are running around the lake, splashing, having fun, and hopefully causing all sorts of permissible mischief because it's a lot of fun up there. So we've got concluding days, Pesach coming up, Monday, Tuesday through Wednesday night. So other than that, let's see, May 2nd through 5th, following, right, we've got our scholar in residence, Dr. Daniel Zafman coming from Israel. He former head of the Chaim Weizmann Institute, which is a big deal. He is a world-renowned physicist with some knowledge as well and expertise in AI, and the focus is really going to be on artificial intelligence and the human connection. One of the talks is going to be about beauty and science, which I think should be also kind of interesting. So lots happening. Please check the emails, the website, and... Oh, Mimuna is Thursday. Okay. You know what? I'm going, but I don't really know why, because this is a festival for all of you gluten eaters. There's not much difference anymore for me between Passover and not Passover, but there's a beautiful Moroccan custom, because there's nothing so good and nothing so tasty as that which you've been denied, right? So immediately after Passover in the Moroccan communities, they would have huge feasts and invite all sorts of their non-Jewish neighbors and eat all sorts of glutinous, sugary, and other sorts of events. We brought that here last year for the first time. We had something like 350 people, and I think we're over 400 now or more. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So thank you for that. I can't even keep up with everything. If you can certainly make it on the last days. 8th day of Pesach, of course, will be Yisker. So we'll have services on Monday, Tuesday, 9:30 as well, and I guess 8:45 on Sunday, if I'm remembering correctly. That's all the announcements I have, unless you guys have any announcements. Then we will conclude on page 62. Services tomorrow, 9:30. We've got our lay leaders taking charge. It should be a lovely service. Yigdal Elohim Chai ve'yishtabach Nimsa v'yein el mitziuto echad v'yein yachid ke'yichudo Ne'lam v'gam ein sov le'akduto En lo demut haguf v'yeino guf Lo nahoch elav kedushato Kadmon l'chol davar asher nivra Rishon v'en reshit l'reshito Hino Adon olam v'chol notzar Yoreh gedulato malchuto Shefa nevuato netano el Anshe segulato v'tifarto Lo kam b'Yisrael ke'Moshe od Navi u'mabid et temunato Torat emet natan li'amo el Ayad nivion eman beto Lo yachal yifel velo yamir dato Leolamim lezulato Sofev yodea sitarenu Mabit l'sof davar b'kadmato Gomel ish chesed kemifalo Noten l'ashara kirishato Yishlach l'ket yamin meshichenu, lifto mechakeket Yeshuato, meitim yechayel berov chasto, Baruch Adei Shem dehilato, meitim yechayel berov chasto, Baruch Adei Shem tehilato. Shabbat shalom. We decided not to stick 2 pieces of matzah out here because I just had this feeling that there would be crumbs everywhere and none of you would come up for it. Was that a good decision, or were you? Okay, I'm just checking because we've got boxes, and if you're itching for matzah, Shabbat shalom, everyone.